This program is provided by Universal Genesis.
Welcome back to the deep dive. So our mission, as you know, is to take these really intimidating intellectual structures.
The ones that just feel impossible to crack.
Exactly. We look at the sources they were built on, and we try to give you the key, the shortcut to understanding their core. And today, we are staring up at an absolute monster, Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel.
And his famous, or maybe infamous, Encyclopedia of the Philosophical Sciences.
It's just this monument of 19th century thought.
Right. And most people approach it assuming they have to untangle this completely original alien philosophy.
Right.
But our deep dive into the sources, well, it's just we should stop trying to decipher the jargon and maybe look at the architecture instead.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Because the sources are pointing us to a pretty radical conclusion about the blueprint he was using. Everyone thinks Hegel invented this whole thing from scratch. What's the core thesis we found?
The central and I think controversial argument is that Hegel wasn't really an original inventor.
Not an inventor.
No. He was a translator, an uncommonly brilliant and dedicated translator. He took these deep, powerful structures from theology, from literature, and he just methodically converted them into abstract philosophical language.
So if we get the translation, we get the system.
Precisely. It explains the immense power of his work. I mean, why it feels so deeply resonant. It's tapping into these foundational cultural stories.
But there's a paradox there.
There is. This reliance on a pre-existing finished blueprint also explains why his system, which is all about movement and history unfolding, is ultimately static. It's fixed. It's completely unupdatable.
And that is the hook for this deep dive. We're going to show you how his major work is, well, a philosophical adaptation of Augustine's City of God.
We'll also look at why his greatest talent was basically editing the feelings of Romantic poets into universal concepts.
And we'll resolve that bizarre paradox, a system of pure movement that actually functions like a philosophical, unmoved mover. Let's start right there with that architectural borrowing. Because when you put Augustine's City of God next to Hegel's Encyclopedia, the parallel is, it's just astonishingly neat.
It really is. Our sources argue that the three massive sections of the Encyclopedia Logic, Natural Philosophy, and Philosophy of Spirit are a complete, almost one-to-one adaptation.
So the structure is just lifted.
The whole structural flow is translated from religious cosmology into philosophical movement. So in Augustine, you have the heavenly city gods, perfect eternal thought.
Okay.
And that becomes Hegel's logic. The realm of the absolute spirit, the logos, is existing as just pure concept.
And then, of course, the fall, the earthly city, the created imperfect world.
And that lands you squarely in Hegel's natural philosophy, the spirit externalized or, in its state of alienation.
The parallel is perfect. So Augustine's final part is the historical journey, the recovery through grace, trying to get back to that perfect state.
And that becomes Hegel's philosophy of spirit. The dialectics of history, where the logos finally achieves its own self-recovery through culture and law and consciousness.
That's a huge claim, though, that a cornerstone of modern philosophy is essentially a translation of a Christian text. Isn't that a bit of an oversimplification?
It would be if we were ignoring the details. But we're talking about the framework. The genius isn't the originality of the structure.
It's the originality of the translation.
That's it. Taking that incredibly powerful narrative, the eternal blueprint, the creation of the world, and the final return, and just mapping philosophical concepts onto every single stage. That theological story is the skeleton holding the entire system up.
So if the whole system is a translation, let's talk about the logic section. That's the most famously difficult part. You're saying its guiding principle is also a direct borrowing.
Absolutely. The logic section, that heavenly city of concepts, is basically built on the policy from the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word.
The logos, the word or reason.
Correct. So Hegel correlates that ancient concept of logos with Begriff, his term for the concept, and he correlates God with the absolute spirit. His logic, therefore, isn't about the physical world at all. It's the pure blueprint. It's the design drawing of reality before anything has been built.
The Garden of Eden of thought?
Untainted by history or physical reality, exactly.
Okay, so the skeleton is theological. What did he use to fill it out? What are the actual materials that make it feel like philosophy?
Well, the sources point to three specific materials in his baggage. First, as we said, Protestant theology. That's the macro framework, the Augustine to Luther flow.
Right. And the second ingredient, Romantic literature, this is what gives it its emotional punch, right? This is why his life was so famously boring.
Completely monotonous.
Yet his writing has these sweeping, profound insights that everyone quotes.
And that's the key. Hegel himself wasn't some sharp, intuitive literary genius, but he was surrounded by them. Goethe, Schiller.
He's a great editor.
He was a brilliant crystallizer. He extracted the profound, emotional, often metaphorical core of Romantic poetry, that feeling of freedom, the tension of the individual, and he abstracted it into cold, philosophical language.
So he wasn't experiencing the sublime, he was just writing the formula for the sublime. He borrowed the profound sensibility and just put a complicated philosophical dress on it.
Exactly. The dress is the extraction, but the power is from the borrowed core. And the third ingredient is maybe the least interesting. It's just the Greek philosophy forms.
Dialectic, idea, logic.
The terms from Plato and Aristotle. But what's really fascinating here is the expertise he lacked.
Right. Outside of this specific historical and theological line, he had a massive knowledge gap.
Our sources suggest he was shockingly limited. I mean, he lacked deep expertise in natural science, in mathematics, in the social sciences that were just starting to emerge around him.
He built the world's most comprehensive system without knowing much about the empirical world.
And that combination, borrowed structure, borrowed emotional content, limited specialized knowledge, it makes the system's notorious difficulty look less like a necessity.
And more like a strategy.
Yes, the triple disguise. It serves two purposes: a defensive wall and an authority device. The jargon forces you to commit so much time and energy that it creates an air of authority.
It's camouflage.
It is. He disguised theology as philosophy. He disguised romantic literary sensibility as absolute insight. And he disguised borrowed Greek forms as logical necessity.
You have to climb this huge wall of terminology just to find the borrowed structure underneath.
It's a brilliant defense mechanism.
Okay, let's try to visualize this. The sources gave us a really useful analogy. The system as a spiral staircase bookshelf.
I love this analogy. It helps you see how all these translated parts fit together. Imagine walking into a library where all human knowledge is shelved, but it's on this one massive spiral staircase.
And as you climb, the view expands. That symbolizes the growing self-consciousness of the world's spirit.
Exactly. And the order of the shelves is very specific, reflecting the spirit's path.
Right, so we start on the bottom shelf with natural science.
Then you climb to ethics, then law, then theology.
And right at the very top is philosophy.
Philosophy is the top shelf. It's the highest point, the final resting place where everything converges on that one central axis, the absolute spirit achieving complete self-understanding.
But here's the catch, right? This library isn't objective.
Not at all. It's Hegel's personal taste, organized. The order is built entirely on the intellectual assumptions and cultural path of 19th century German thought.
Okay, so we have this static blueprint, this heavenly city of logic. How did he get it to move? If it was just Kant's categories, it would just be a dead table of contents.
Well, Kant's 12 categories were static. You're right. They were a noun list, like an inventory. Hegel needed an engine to make them move and generate new concepts automatically.
And that engine is the famous dialectic.
Yes. The three-stage movement. He turned Kant's static list into a dynamic process. A concept or thesis generates its own inner contradiction, the anti-concept or antithesis.
And then the two are resolved into the third stage, the synthesis.
Right, and that third stage, synthesis, is often translated as Aufhebung. We should probably clarify that term because it's so much more than a simple compromise.
Yeah, that's crucial.
Simple synthesis is just mixing A and B to get C. Aufhebung is more complex. It has a triple meaning in German: to abolish, to preserve, and to lift up.
Abolish, preserve, and lift up.
So when the concept and anti-concept meet, the synthesis abolishes their one-sided truths. It preserves what was essential in both, and it lifts them up to a new, higher, more complete level of truth. And this little apparatus converted Kant's 12 fixed categories into an infinitely multiplying concept universe.
It brought life and the illusion of automatic generation to the realm of pure thought. And this is where the whole thing comes crashing down. Because that massive self-generating system has a fatal structural flaw. Our sources all point to one crucial omission: the total absence of the inductive process.
This is the definitive critique. Deduction is moving from a general concept down to a specific case.
Like drawing the blueprint for the logic section first.
Right. Induction is the opposite. It's learning from specific empirical facts and observations to build a general theory. Hegel's system operates entirely on the premise that the story of reason is already complete.
It starts at the top shelf of philosophy and only looks down. It can't look up from the world and learn.
Precisely. It lacks the capacity to correct itself, to update itself, to learn from new empirical knowledge or new historical experience.
I mean, think about what came after Hegel. Darwinian evolution, psychoanalysis, quantum physics.
All of these things introduce facts and processes that the existing structure just cannot account for.
So when a new science like evolutionary biology comes along, the system can't just add a new wing to the library?
The bookshelf cannot grow new shelves or new staircase segments. When new facts are discovered, they have to be retroactively forced into a chapter that was already written. You end up jamming new books into old fixed sections, which leads to these tortured interpretations to make it all fit.
Which brings us back to that great irony. Hegel describes a universe that's all about movement.
The world spirit unfolding, history proceeding dialectically, constantly generating new stages of truth.
Yet the massive, intricate philosophical system that's explaining all this movement remains entirely fixed, immobile.
It's a completed structure built on 19th century assumptions. This is what makes Hegel's philosophy, in a way, the last static system of the modern era. It's the philosophical unmoved mover.
A system that describes movement but cannot move itself, a massive contradiction.
And to maintain a fixed system that claims to explain all of history, you got to have a fixed version of history.
Which leads us to what the sources call philosophical peripheral history. To justify his endpoint, which is the completion of spirit in 19th century German thought, Hegel needed his historical writings to be something other than objective scholarship.
They weren't. They were basically background myths or, internal PR videos.
PR videos, I like that.
His history lectures were not deep dives. They were curated narratives designed to support his own predetermined conclusion. The content is often, as the sources point out, startlingly shallow, almost at a middle school textbook level compared to his philosophical work.
And that shallow history comes from having very limited sources.
Absolutely. It was mostly Greek, Roman, and early Christian European history. He had virtually no deep, nuanced understanding of Islamic, Chinese, Indian, or African civilizations. So the facts he did have were selected specifically to fit the three-stage dialectical pattern he needed.
The East, one is free, then Greece and Rome, some are free.
And finally the German world, all are free. Anything that didn't fit that neat little story or didn't lead directly to him was just excluded.
Which makes his history of philosophy really valuable, not for what it includes, but for what it tells us about his exclusion criteria.
It's like an X-ray of his thinking. His philosophy history is a perfect syllabus of exclusion. When you look at what he rejected, like the huge traditions of Chinese or Indian thought, you see his rules for cutting concepts.
So what's the first rule?
If an idea focuses on harmony or eternal return or mysticism, it gets rejected. It lacks that necessary internal tension, the dialectical engine. So it's dismissed as undeveloped.
Not moving.
Not moving. Rule 2. If it doesn't clearly articulate the growth of subjectivity, that is, the emergence of self-consciousness, the thinking subject, the idea of individual freedom, it's cut.
The subject has to be on the path toward the absolute spirit.
Exactly. Rule 3. Any thought system that doesn't lead clearly toward the Greek, Roman, Christian, Protestant, and finally modern Germany trajectory is just marginalized. It has to converge on his answer.
And the final rule.
If a system couldn't be cleanly assigned to one of the absolute spirit's pre-written narrative chapters, it was just rejected outright. His history isn't a global exploration of thought. It's a magnificent self-justification, a story built backward from his own system to prove he was the inevitable, necessary endpoint.
Okay, let's unpack all of this and synthesize it for you. What stands out most profoundly, I think, is that Hegel is best understood not as the ultimate inventor,
No.
but as a supremely gifted translator. He converted Augustine's deep theological structure and the raw emotional power of Romantic poetry into this massive, intricate philosophical machine.
And that machine, while telling the greatest story of all time, the unfolding of the world spirit, remains fatally trapped in the cultural and intellectual assumptions of the 19th century. And that's because its foundational mechanism, the logic, was built without that essential self-correcting capacity of induction.
So it's a monumental, architecturally sound, often beautiful.
But fundamentally unupdatable house.
An unupdatable house. So what does this all mean for you, the learner who's engaging with Hegel today? If Hegel's system is defined by its lack of induction, its inability to truly learn from new empirical facts, and if its famed difficulty was partly a deliberate disguise to hide borrowed content, well, we're left with this thought. If you read Hegel today, Are you actually engaging with the absolute self-unfolding spirit of the universe? Or are you simply admiring a magnificent antique translation of someone else's divine structure?
And that is the core question you now have to explore on your own.
We've given you the blueprint, now you can go deep. Thank you for joining the deep dive.
This program is provided by Universal Genesis.